This is Dr. Timothy Johnson. I will be going live in approximately 2 minutes. This is quite an important broadcast. I'm happy to use this platform to perhaps win my second Pulitzer Prize because this is quite groundbreaking. I have the bear crawl here. Okay. Try to make yourself oddly aware of all the potentialities and all that can happen around you. Realize that I use this logo and this category way before Facebook rebranded to Meta. I was using this around Austin, Texas. This is one of my graffiti signs. I would graffiti in tape. And there's a gentleman out of the New York graffiti scene who had lost a lot of his friends in the New York City scene and collected their art there that went by the name J-O-K-T. I would call it a capital J, a lowercase k, a kind of intermediate, a lowercase o, so you got a J-O, and then the K was kind of intermediate in between a lowercase and uppercase, and then the T, if I remember correctly, it was a cross T. And anyhow, I used this logo, but during the captivity that I endured during COVID, Facebook rebranded to Meta, so now I can't even get my story out there without being boxed in by a corporate entity. So that's why the X platform's essential, even though I only have a few followers. Each of my followers are due to consciousness raising and a well-articulated point. Maybe some of the more important viewers. And along those lines, Mr. Scott Adams, thanks for tuning in today. And another important gentleman that I'll get into as soon as we get started here. It's a bit early for me, so let me adjourn. To the second cup of coffee, the second pint of coffee. Today's coffee. Today's coffee. Today's coffee. Divine coffee. To the occultists out there, to the Christians, to the Buddhists, and all those in between. Tuning in. If you want to assume some lotus position type pose, just make yourself comfortable and enjoy the cup of coffee first and foremost. The entire cup of coffee. Get in a meditative space. Breathe in. Breathe out. Okay, so okay. So I believe Coffee with Dr. Timothy Johnson is commencing now, and now.
Yeah. Okay. Let's zoom out a little bit or something like that. I don't know. Okay. So, before we jump into today's podcast, I wouldn't call it a podcast necessarily or whatever. This information transmission in what I call Black Box 1. It's basically maybe, I don't want to get into the details of that. I must stay concentrated in purpose today. Dearly beloved, gathered here today, this morning, enjoying your favorite beverages, whether that's coffee or some type of DMT type substance that you drink, I guess. And that will jump me straight to the point. There is quite an interesting character. I've done some research on him. If I'm not mistaken, he maybe is a Spanish gentleman, and he's into DMT. To be short about it, I myself was familiar with the studies done in the book. What was it called? God Molecule. And I read that research circa 2008. At that time, I was engaged in some form of corporate espionage at the Whole Foods headquarters in Austin, Texas. That I did not get paid for because I got off task a little bit. There was a blonde and a brunette there, and I kept trying to maybe finesse a certain situation. Maybe I don't know, but I got kicked out of there before I could fulfill my mission. But I did do some critical work. And I believe the statute of limitations is certainly passed. But I did do some work with Bezos and takeover there at Whole Foods. I guess that's where the information ended up concerning the data centers and what exactly it was the extraction of data that Whole Foods was interested in. And let's see. Concerning the graffiti scene, this maybe too will let me talk about this gentleman here who, let me just show you this guy. This guy here. Him. This guy. I've ran into him quite a few times. This guy here. And interestingly enough, he did subscribe to me on the X platform. I found that to be interesting because usually we're boxed in and we're not allowed to make international contacts. So this is interesting. If he is in fact living in Spain, I haven't had a chance to deep dive into him, but I find it amazing. Either someone's playing an elaborate game of trying to control my sense of reality, but for instance, this gentleman, look at his name there. Now, realize this artwork that I just bought yesterday from a famous graffiti artist who's known to be quite prophetic. You got this thing. This is this graffiti artist here who's known to be quite, better than Bankscape for sure. But anyhow, if you'll notice here, it's the door thing. And here's what the point I was trying to get at here is this. And if you open it up, look. Andre Trace Gomez Emilson. And that leads us to this section, which if you're not familiar with this artist here, this will mean that there's another section, like a card here probably that goes here oftentimes. And if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be God something. And anyhow, and I did notice that he's on his website. I haven't had a chance to research it exhaustively, but he has something called qualiacomputing.com. And here, this artist here that I just purchased yesterday, it's amazing. But look at this. It has qualia right in the title, which I thought that that's more like a consciousness debate, like a philosophical use of quantity versus quality to start talking about computing in qualia. I'm trying to just even think about that branding and what this might say about this gentleman. But for people that don't know, a lot of my efforts in the formal sciences, specifically the emergence of human beings with computers, well, I don't want to complain, but they were waylaid by being grabbed by the government for 3 years on some bullshit. From what I understand, my twin brother, who I work with on these problems and worked with since I was a kid, apparently, when we used to play with Play-Doh. And we came up with our own little private coding language involving the colored Play-Doh. I guess that pattern recognition between us, I guess that type of bonding that happens between twins trying to share a space. And if I understand, my brother was quite competitive. It wasn't a Jacob and Esau thing, but, you know, we were separated for quite a long time. I think since we were 3 until we both joined the Navy. And come to find out, I was working at what was then called the National Naval Medical Center, and my twin brother was working at the National Institute of Health across the street, of all things. And anyhow, that's a story for another day, but the captivity that happened there in Texas, and where my brother's still being held under crazy circumstances, I can only laugh at the so-called justice system of Texas. I'm going to try to not use the tools that the government trained me in on destabilizing governments. You know, I'm trying not to create a code orange, you know, where I start maybe using divide and conquer techniques, you know, like kind of imploring the vested people of Texas. I mean, the people who actually wear vests, like the colored vests, you know, like the neon green vests, the neon orange vests, because they get, you know, they're out there. They're the people that wear vests. Do they know about the Canadian vest movements and the French vest movements? Do they know about these things? Anyhow, I do want to talk a bit about Scott Adams. I did not see till late in the day, where I already had time investitures ahead of me, that he posted a podcast. I briefly saw he looked healthy. One of the things this Spanish gentleman has tasked me to do is let me know what brilliant insights Scott Adams has ever had. He stopped watching him about 2020. I was tasked by my handler or whoever to monitor Scott Adams on Periscope, and then YouTube, and then, you know, what it's grown into. I kind of followed him somewhat all the way into my captivity. I found him to be interesting. I never thought Gilbert was funny. I don't necessarily find him to be funny. But anyhow, the Spanish guy's like, can you justify, and I guess his standard is brilliance. I don't consider Scott Adams to be brilliant. And to me, and, you know, maybe it's different for a Spanish person, but kind of what I consider to be Americana, like, you know, the best values of the United States, etc. He's kind of a normie, you know. He's not, like, my appeal is he's not so brilliant that he could just mind trick me. But he maybe can, because he said he has some hypnotic techniques. And I know that you're heavy into DMT, so you're probably a suggestible kind of trance-induced type person. So I would be interested if do you even like the early on, did you recognize how he would hit the coffee cup and some of these like trance techniques, and then also the kind of little jingle he had in it, or did you skip over that? Like just the production value. You have to remember, like in the 70s, think about the medium. Think about, I don't know if you're familiar with Marshall McLuhan, but think about the medium. They outlawed subliminal messages in the movie theaters, for instance. Well, the audio gets more sophisticated, and you can do that kind of now with things, and it's not regulated. So I would be curious how the Spanish guy has listened to Scott Adams, but also I think the audio has changed with Scott Adams, and maybe he's not doing such things. So I thought maybe that would just that early technique of using that someone trained in hypnotism and the persuasion, and it was clear that Scott Adams had observed a lot of cable TV, and that put him in kind of a boomer class of person for me, because that was kind of their go-to, like the male generation that followed the boomers, their children, etc. We jumped onto the internet early on and didn't see anything worth keeping in cable because it was all there on the internet. Plus, for cheaper, and I guess the boomer class was used to paying for cable, and that was just a part of their monthly thing, and so they did that. It's kind of that's kind of my dad's class, and then so there's probably something personal of why each person was attracted to him. Then I had a gig where I was working all night, and I would drink coffee, and I would watch his recording, and I enjoyed drinking coffee and like getting caught up with the news, and it was like watching the top news stories with my dad, because he kind of regurgitated talking points on TV, and I did find some of his news analysis to not be brilliant, on some kind of dry academic, very verbal oriented type thing, but it was like hanging out with my dad and watching the news stories where he would have an interesting take on it that's not like my own. Back then, Scott Adams wasn't an outright Republican. I feel like out of just good manners, he's had to present himself as more and more being Republican because look at the favors he's doing. Like, people have reached out to him to the degree that it's saved his life, I guess. And that's another thing. Like, I was held captive for 3 years by government goons. I could never really even find out if it was federal or state in Texas. I won't get into that now. But in fleeing and getting caught back up, and like I had to flee Texas, almost like a underground, like underground. Well, anyhow, I got out of Texas, and what was I trying to convey? I got locked into that whole. Seems like I lost my train of thought. Where Scott Adams. I got caught up in, I guess the election's going on, and I would download his stuff. I was scared to connect to the internet, but I would drive into. I probably shouldn't disclose all this type of stuff, but anyhow, for me, it's like the news with my dad. He's not so brilliant where he can fool me. I really like people that people that are so intelligent that they can completely pull the wool over my eyes type things. I don't want to be around those people because I don't like subjugation like that, so like those people I don't really hang out with, so he's just smart enough where he gives me insights and things like that, and then he's on target with a lot of the things that I think are very huge questions, I would say it's just a recurring thing is the Plato's dialogue with Gorgia for me, and this emphasis in his life that he puts on affirmative affirmations, and with perhaps a skeptic would say a pragmatic way of looking at affirmations, but perhaps also a mystical type thing of like, what if everything is rhetoric? And I guess even these categories of thought, without going into detail, probably don't mean anything unless I build a whole system to explain what rhetoric means in my thought, but it overlaps with what he's calling persuasion and simulation theory, which has just snowballed and snowballed. It was ridiculous when I first started thinking about it in 2005, but I do think it is I think I'm bouncing around too much, so let's just keep this short because I need to get caught up. One of the things this gentleman's talking about computing. I have yet to fully digest, and I had a lot of my notes lost scrambling around. And then there's 3 years where I'm in captivity. Like, you wouldn't even think that the government could hold you for a year and a half without sunlight, but it must have something to do with my father having power of attorney over me and various types of ownership, which he's used to keep me separated from my twin brother. And I maybe shouldn't get into the family politics straight away like that, but thank you for following. If you could spread the word, I am being suppressed by the algorithm. Yes, I could get the blue affirmation, but it makes it easier for the government to track me in a time when I can't afford to be tracked. I'm using various aliases. It's crazy here. Anyhow, all right. God bless everyone. Have a blessed day.